Over the course of 5 films, Sean Connery firmly establishes himself as James Bond, secret agent 007.
Bond. James Bond.
During the production of You Only Live Twice, Connery resigns from the series.
Sayonara.
Producers Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman are now faced with a formidable challenge. Who will fill James Bond's shoulder holster? Ian Fleming's novel on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which he writes in Jamaica while Dr. No is being filmed, becomes a bestseller when it is published in April 1963. It is immediately acclaimed as one of the most engaging Bond novels. But the film version is often postponed.
At the end of Goldfinger, they weren't certain what they were going to do. They probably did their thinking about On Her Majesty's Secret Service whilst they were out in Switzerland when they were doing the locations with Goldfinger.
During the release of Thunderball, contests are held to select 12 women to star opposite Sean Connery in the next 007 adventure, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. But scheduling conflicts prevent winter shooting, and the producers decide the next Bond film will be You Only Live Twice.
I said, I've finished with editing. I don't want to do any more editing. I'm going to direct. That's what I want to do.
But first, Hunt has to finish work on another Cubby Broccoli production.
During my work on Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, I had been working with Dick Maybaum on the script of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, so it wasn't an abrupt change.
Peter Hunt takes much of his second unit from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang into the new 007 production.
My introduction to the Bond picture was through Peter Hunt.
And I already was in a wonderful friendship and easy conversation with Michael Reed.
He said, would you like to do it with me? So I said, I'd love to. So he said, it was going to be a tough picture, you know. So I said, well, that's fair enough.
For guidance, Hunt looks back to the earliest James Bond films of director Terence Young.
Terence Young was a great influence on me for everything. Yes, you know, Terence could have played James Bond. Would have been great, now I think about it, if he'd have played James Bond and I'd have done the directing. That would have been terrific if he could have only been the James Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Feeling that gadgets have too large a role in the Bond films, Peter Hunt decides to keep the script close to Ian Fleming's novel.
The whole idea was we're going to go away from the gadgets and get on more into the personality of the actors.
The book of On Her Majesty's Secret Service was a great story, and it was a Fleming James Bond book. And so we didn't have to deviate. I didn't want to deviate. I didn't want to put gimmicks and tricks in it to make it. It didn't need making better. It was there. It was all there.
Going back to a more realistic style means getting away from lavish sets and high-key cinematography.
So he said, I want to shoot this as real as what we can make it. He said, I don't want it to look as though it'd been shot in a studio. So I said, fine.
Meanwhile, the search continues for a location to match Ian Fleming's description of Blofeld's mountaintop hideout.
German production manager mentioned that there was this place in Mürren called Schildhorn.
The great thing about On Her Majesty's was finding the Piz Gloria, finding the identical that Fleming had written in the book.
The Schildhorn location is almost perfect, but requires the installation of a 2,000-amp generator and the building of a helipad. But finding the spectacular location doesn't solve the filmmaker's biggest problem. The producers need a new 007.
I tested and tested and interviewed I don't know how many hundred. And we went through a whole range of discussions saying, what would the new Bond look like? Should we make him a modern Bond? And it was agreed by practically everybody in the end that no, what we wanted was another Sean Connery.
And then a television commercial catches Peter Hunt's attention.
We'd all seen this guy in a Fry commercial, and he certainly did look very good, handsome, and more the style of what we were looking for.
28-year-old George Lazenby, a former car salesman from Australia who has become a male model in England, soon receives a fateful phone call from agent Maggie Abbott.
I got a phone call in Paris from Maggie saying, "You got to come over to London. I think that you're ideal for this role that they can't fill." And I said, "What's the role?" And she said, "I think you'd be right for James Bond." And I said, "Why's that?" She said, "Just your arrogance."
Lazenby contacts Anthony Sinclair, who had tailored Connery's suits for previous 007 films.
And I said, "I want a suit like Sean Connery." And they said, "Well, it'll take about 6 weeks. But I got one here that they didn't pick up, they don't want. If you like that, I'll sell it to you." And I got longer arms by about this much than him, because all they did was put the sleeves down. Bob's your uncle, I got his suit. And then I went to his barber, Kurt the barber, at the Dorchester Hotel. And I said, "Give me a haircut like Sean Connery." And meanwhile, Cubby Broccoli's in the chair right behind me, because they all used that barber. Someone said later that Cubby said, "This guy'd make a good James Bond, but he looks like a successful businessman." And that was how the story started, that Cubby discovered me in a barber shop.
But Lazenby still has to get past formidable opposition. The receptionist at Eon Productions.
So I was sort of hanging out outside in the footpath, walking up and down, and as soon as she bent down behind the desk, I went shooing up the stairs to where the casting was. And she's going, "Wait, hey, come back here." But it was too late. I was already up the stairs and leaning on the door saying, "I heard you're looking for James Bond."
Soon, Lazenby finds himself face-to-face with James Bond co-producer Harry Saltzman.
Harry had his feet up in the desk, no shoes on, leaning back, talking on the phone. He kind of pointed at the chair like this, "Sit down." And I thought, "I'm not sitting down there while your feet are up there," to myself, and I went over and looked out the window. And then he put down his feet and sort of straightened himself up, and he said, "Have a seat." I think I got respect right there.
And I must say, this boy, George Lazenby, looked extremely good and moved very well.
And I said, "Peter, I got to live with you. I'm not an actor." He said, "What?" He said, "You got to be an actor." I said, "I'm not." He said, "I'll tell you what. You stick to your story, and I'll make you the next James Bond."
The only thing that concerned me was the fact that he'd never been an actor before.
Up that Australian swagger, walk like Prince Philip.
He had a lot of voice coaching too.
I had this Australian accent, which is rather thick because I was from Queanbeyan, you know. I was right out the back of Australia. And Harry used to say, "How the hell's anyone going to understand him?" He said, "I can't." You know?
By now we'd cast Dinah Rigg, and she had met him, and all that had gone very well.
This was a mammoth production, I mean an epic. And I've never done an epic before. And I rather wanted to know what it was like to be in an epic.
I'd already spoken to Diana and said, "I want you to meet this boy, and I'd like you to be very honest with me and tell me what you think afterwards." And the next day I was delighted because she rang me and said, "I think he's fine. I think he'll be fine."
Diana, you know, she started out being a great ally, saying, you know, "I'll help you as much as I can."
Diana, she's totally different to George. I mean, you would expect her to be, but there's no pretensions about the lady. She's a professional all the way through, a fine actress.
I was this young upstart guy who probably didn't know a tenth of what she knew about the business.
Although Lazenby wins Rigg's approval, the producers still need convincing and continue searching for a new Bond.
We were well on our way to, and we hadn't got a James Bond. We hadn't got a leading man.
I thought that if they could find an actor with the ruthlessness of Jack Palance and the charm of Cary Grant, they would have a good James Bond. And I think that George came up to that.
I remember seeing, being invited to see kind of all the tests they had on various actors, and George was obviously the one to do the part.
It really was a sort of deadline. It was like within 2 weeks of shooting.
For whatever reason, he wanted me in the role.
From our point of view, he looked like a credible James Bond.
The producers want to know how Lazenby looks in action. Hunt turns to stunt arranger George Leach.
He'd done a love scene with one of the leading ladies, I believe, a test scene, and then they wanted to see how he was at action.
George hadn't learned how to withhold the punch, so when we started to do the fight sequence, he really went for him as for real.
When they turn the cameras over, the speed, the energy, everything changes. I immediately knocked the guy on his backside, this big Russian wrestler.
He just whacked him.
He did punch poor old Yuri Boryenko on the nose and busted his nose.
And Harry Saltzman just steps over Yuri, the guy is laying on the ground, and says, "We're going with you." Just like that.
It got George Lazenby the job.
And then the decision was made, and that was it.
I hope I can live up to your high standards.
The odds were I'd get it, because I wanted it more than anybody else.
With a new James Bond, filmmakers now set the rest of the cast, beginning with the villainous Blofeld.
It was Covey's idea to say to me, "What about Telly for Blofeld?" And I fell right in for it. I said, "Oh, great, lovely. Nothing I'd like better."
Telly, he was a character. I mean, that guy, he's a night owl.
He used to come sometimes rather bleary-eyed to the set if you had an early call, but he was always very professional.
But he'd always show up ready, and he'd come on the set and blow you away. I mean, he knew what he was doing.
For the role of Blofeld's henchwoman, Hunt casts a respected German actress, Ilse Steppert.
And you couldn't help but like her, and she was deep. I mean, I remember watching her act, and I thought, that's what acting's about. You know, she's really there every time. I wasn't capable of that at the time.
For the role of Sir Hilary Bray, Peter Hunt turns to a neighbour.
We lived quite close to each other. He said, "Would you like to play part in the Bond?" And I said, "Oh, that sounds lovely."
I'd met George Baker, and I'd listened to him speak, and I knew that he was the guy I was imitating. I did practice that accent quite a bit, you know. I can't do it now. "I'm Sir Hilary Bray from the British College of Arms," you know, it was that kind of thing.
And much later, I got the brilliant idea of putting George's voice on there, George Baker's voice on it.
And it wasn't until I saw the film that I realized that they looped me.
The rest of the cast comes from the far points of the globe. On Monday, October the 21st, 1968, shooting begins at the Piz Gloria location in Switzerland.
And the first shot that we did was a crane shot of bringing Lazenby up the stairs into the room where these 12 beautiful girls are.
My nerves level was always pretty confident.
I walked into the main set and he was sitting there, his heavy overcoat on and a hat pulled out in the star's chair, totally relaxed.
I mean, he tried very hard to kind of do it right, and he was good to work with and professional to work with.
I think it was getting in the trolley cars or something. I was just lined up with the rest of the guys, and Harry came up and said, "Look, whatever you think, this guy's the star of the picture. Treat him like one."
Joanna Lumley, as usual, has a very, very strong personality, and she organised us all. She said, "Now, what we ought to do, girls, is we ought to have something to do while we're stuck up this mountain. Now, I suggest crochet." So we all started to crochet. We crocheted blankets, shawls, and all the fellas thinking, "Oh, there's a lot of crumpet here on the set." We were all crocheting. "Sorry, no, I can't come out tonight because I've almost finished my crochet blanket."
The men find other pursuits.
Telly had phoned us up at 11 o'clock at night to say, "Come on down, you know, I've got 3 other guys, we can get a poker school together."
Your per diem comes in cash. So my briefcase got so stacked up with cash, I'd open it and it'd be falling out. And so Telly saw it. He said, "Hey, you want to play some cards?" And Harry heard about it. So Harry came up to the set. And Telly said, No, Harry, no." Anyway, he wanted back all my money. Put in my briefcase, shut up, and he said, "Now leave my boy alone."
From card sharks to cable cars, the new 007 faces real risks.
They left me out there once hanging from 3,000 feet. Couldn't fall, but it was like, whoa, it's a long way up here. And I'd tell Peter, I said, the other fellow didn't have to do that. Why do I have to do it?
It's a feat that stuntman Dickie Creighton finds difficult.
There was a stuntman who was brave, who did it for real, hanging out there. And you know, when we shot that, it was pouring with snow.
Well, the only safety devices I had were 2 hooks in the palms of my hand, attached by nylon tape to my safety belt. So, although it looked as if I was hanging on by my hands, I was in fact attached by the hooks. I just moved the hooks like that as I went down the cable. The difficulty was that the ice had formed on the cable. So therefore, instead of the hooks locking onto the cable, I found myself sliding down towards Murren, which is 2 or 3 miles below. Fortunately, there was some backup stuntmen on the first pylon who caught hold of me as I approached it. Otherwise, I think I might still be going.
The stresses of making a multi-million-dollar epic in a difficult location begin to show. Co-producer Cubby Broccoli visits the location in November.
I was in London and Cubby called me. They were in Switzerland in a charming little town called Mürren, just above Zurich. He said, this atmosphere, he said, is just awful. He said, I can't bear it.
It was heavy work and very trying.
I said, look, why don't I come up and we'll give a party for everyone, drivers, everybody, stars, whatever. And then maybe people will start to relax. And we were all having a good time at the party, and no George Lazenby, and everybody's saying, oh, he's not going to arrive. And then all of a sudden, there he was at the doorway, just standing there. So I went up to him and I said, oh, George, come on, come over here and sit down with us. And, all right, he said, you know, and he wouldn't talk. And I said, George, why are you angry? What's bothering you? He said, well, I did not get an invitation to this party. I said, George, it was on the call sheet, it was in the lifts, everybody knew it. He said, but I'm the star. So I laughed because I never heard anybody say that before, you know. Well, Cubby did not think it was funny. And he said to him, listen, you're not a star because you say you're a star. You're not a star because I say you're a star. You're a star when the public call you a star. And we have yet to see that.
Lazenby gives the producer other worries.
George Lazenby wasn't allowed by insurance to ski.
When no one was around, I used to take off on the skis. And I looked up one day and Cubby was in the cable car going up there. I could saw his eyes just about pop out. That's him going down the slopes.
Despite the producer's concerns, work continues in Pisgloria's Alpine Room.
Thy dawn, O master of the world, thy dawn. For thee the sunlight creeps across the lawn.
Thy dawn, O master of the world, thy dawn. It's by James Elroy Flecker.
For thee the markets throng with myriad slaves.
He did the scenes for me between Telly Savalas and Diana Rigg, you know, to make the dialogue a little bit sharper and a little better and a little more intellectual.
While the main unit deals with intellectual scenes, the second unit hits the slopes.
John Glenn, in fact, came out and took over the second unit, which was his first directing stint on the Majesty Secret Service, and of course he went on from there to direct a few Bonds.
Whilst I was at Pinewood one day in the bar, in came John Glenn, who'd worked with me and who, in fact, been youngsters with me.
He thrust a script in my hands and said, read the sequence. And I read it, and he said, would you like to direct it? I said, lead me to it. You know, this is the most wonderful opportunity.
He was just like a schoolboy when I first met him. I mean, he was so enthusiastic. He wanted to film everything.
I just kept shooting, you know, I'm just, you know, never stopped.
We'd say, well, you can't do that. And he'd say, but why? Why? It's there. If it's in front of you, you can shoot it.
And even when the weather was foul, I was doing inserts and things.
You know, you're an editor. You should realize about it matching. Oh, he said, I'll make it match. I'll make it match.
Shooting a Bond film has requirements far above the norm, so a call goes out to one of the world's foremost skiers.
I got a phone call from Cubby Broccoli asking me if I was interested in working with the Bond people. I was supposed to go for 3 weeks, and I was staying for 3 months then, so it was a great adventure.
When I first saw his material, at the very end of the rushes, this material came up, which was all handheld. The most exciting skiing material with the guy skiing, following skiers through trees, and one guy, in fact, leaping up in a tree.
Skiing is my profession, or was my profession as an Olympic skier, and I didn't have too much problems with, you know, actually skiing with a camera.
One of the most spectacular skiers I've ever come across.
None of the stuntmen, certainly not myself, have had the ability to do what Willy Bogner could. He skied forwards, backwards, sideways, from the top of roofs. He was brilliant.
This guy could ski backwards as fast as I could go frontwards with a camera. And then spray you as well.
He built an Aeroflex into a box, and surmounted on top of the Aeroflex was a Hasselblad camera, which he could look straight down.
I can remember skiing with Willie down the hill, and he was skiing literally backwards, not watching where he's going, holding the camera, and just flicking up little sprays of snow at you, just for the fun of it.
He just shot lots of material for me, of wonderful skiing.
You had to use really professional people who stay calm under pressure.
And he shot a lot of very good material, of course he was. Going round the skiers, following the skier on one ski. He shot all that skiing material.
So we had some great skiers on it. So Lucky Lightner did all the skiing for Bond, and Willy Bogner would do it for Blofeld. And I did the fall over the cliff where he loses a ski. Lucky did the bit losing a ski, and I did the bit skidding up and hanging over the 1,500-foot edge. There was obviously a cable to stop me going right over the edge. And then you keep your fingers crossed that the cables stop you.
Shots of the main actors on skis are achieved by less dangerous means.
Her shots of skiing, you know, she was just kneeling on a board, really. But it worked all right.
Overhead views of the ski action require the talents of aerial specialist Johnny Jordan.
He was a great guy, great guy.
I'd heard stories about him before he arrived. He was like a hero cameraman, this guy.
I think what attracted John to it was a great deal of helicopter work to be done. There was a lot of skiing to be filmed from the air.
He was hanging by a parachute harness from a helicopter high enough up so that it wouldn't spray up the snow, so you wouldn't see the spray from the helicopter. And the helicopter had to go through all the moguls and down the slope.
What it gave him was virtually an unobstructed 360-degree view. So he was in a position to film from an angle that nobody had hitherto been able to film from.
He would skim along with his camera and do some most fantastic shots of skiers, groups of skiers, gunmen firing.
He had to dress very warmly.
His leg was scraping in the snow and going up and down, but he's a happy-go-lucky guy, you know.
And I remember once saying to him, what does it feel like to be hanging there? Because you're just hanging in space. He said, I feel like God.
In early December, the 1st and 2nd units team up to film the attack on Pisgloria.
In those days, you weren't just a double for the lead actor, you'd be, you know, be a stuntman as well. So I was one of the guys in white, jumping out the helicopters on the Shiltorn and running up the hill and getting shot and blown up and flamethrowers and all sorts of things like that.
So it was blown over the side of the fortress. Nearly missed the rig because it was all white. The problem was that when you leapt out of the copter, you had no way to know how high you were up.
One doesn't know exactly how far you were going to sink into the snow.
You're looking down onto white, and you don't know how far away that is.
I found myself up to my nose, so just the top of my hat was visible.
I can remember jumping out of a helicopter, and boy, did it hurt.
I dreamed up the idea of putting a cord on him so that he could dash and slide on his belly all the way across the ice rink, firing the gun as he's sliding along on his belly. And when it came to the premiere, they got quite a cheer, that little episode.
I was a physical person. I mean, I could do physical stuff.
Lazenby was active and fit and great fun, and one of the boys. He liked mixing with the stunt guys, and I thought he was, you know, a great guy.
On the evening of December the 8th, 1968, Peter Hunt and his crew filmed one of the noisiest fight scenes in screen history.
I wanted the real bells. I wanted the noise.
All right, let's do take two.
Poor John Mitchell, who was my sound man, he was the one who had to put up with all that.
In late December, the main unit returns to Pinewood to begin filming interior scenes of Blofeld's complex, while the 2nd unit switches from ski action to bobsled action.
There had been a run in Murren many, many years earlier, and I think 3 English lords or 4 English lords had got killed on this particular run, and so they disbanded.
I thought, this is marvelous. Could we have it again?
The corners where you corner at 60, 70 miles an hour, were melting and were becoming very dangerous.
And I do remember thinking, I'm out of control. But fortunately, the runway more or less took you round the corners itself.
Nobody got really badly hurt, as far as I can remember, but it was always terrifying to stand on the end. You never knew, when you were operating the camera, whether they'd come flying up towards you.
And you didn't seem to need any skill. You just needed to hang on.
Impressed by Johnny Jordan's footage of the ski sequence, second unit director John Glenn calls the cameraman back into action.
He and I talked about it, and we laid on a couple of sessions where he came over the Bob Run and filmed some beautiful aerial shots for us of some of the action. Of course, we did have our accidents on the Bob Run. One in particular was where Bond comes out of the Bob. There was a crash, and he just slid along the top of the wall with the Bob in the run with him. And what I did was I spoke to Peter Hunt that evening, and we rewrote the script, the action script, to incorporate any accidents like that.
Stuntman Joe Powell receives a particularly heady assignment.
I was talking to Joe one day, and I said, it'd be wonderful if, we could see your head smashing into the wall. And he said, oh yeah, fine, I'll do that. And he was such a tough guy.
The only way that we could get Tully Savalas and George to get their heads like hitting the side of the actual Bob Run, we went back to the old-fashioned system of a rolling drum.
One stunt proves particularly difficult to pull off.
Joe Powell, who was doubling Blofeld, he had to get the forked stick in the neck and pull him off.
It required a special harness and a wire, which is on a special tensioned spring of some sort.
He came tearing down there and stuck his head up, and the wire snapped, and he just went headfirst into this piece of wood.
We finished up doing that shot back in the studio with the real actor, where conditions were much more controllable.
On January the 25th, 1969, the unit begins shooting a variation on the required car chase, with a driving unit supervised by Eric Lavista.
The ice was so good, so skiddy, that it was marvelous.
It's hard to drive on ice, I found out.
But once you get in that car, and you know it doesn't matter how much you damage the car, and you're going to skid and fly all over the place, you enjoy it. It's wonderful.
But I turned right before the corner and just endoed over the bed. And Peter came and put a stop to that.
Diana Rigg, against insurance, I think, or whatever, drove most of the car herself.
I got one of the conventional shots and turned it upside down so it looked as though he was travelling on the roof. Just a simple editing trick, but it got a good laugh in the cinema.
In mid-March, the filmmakers shoot yet another breathtaking scene.
I was determined that there would be an avalanche.
I set out with a small crew, and we went to this uninhabited pass, and we had a helicopter dropping bombs on the high mountains all around us. And we dropped these 3 bombs, and what happened was unbelievable. Well, it's in the film, you see it in the film, but it was like a huge avalanche. It was stretched 2 miles wide. It was coming down towards us, and I could see this snow and rocks and everything tumbling off of all the ledges, 2 miles wide, right in front of us. It hit the ground and then burst up and went over the top of us, and all our coats, anything that was loose that was lying around, was just blown away.
The long shot you got is just a long shot of the avalanche. The 2 people in it skiing down, representing Diana Rigg and George Lazenby, were put in there by my lovely friend Cliff Gully.
Peter needed extra shots of the snow coming down, which was all salt, with model trees, and then we optically printed that over the 2 skiers, which they'd shot in Switzerland.
On Friday, March the 21st, 1969, on the A stage at Pinewood Studios, Hunt directs a scene that Bond fans thought they'd never see. 007 proposing marriage.
You've come from all that action and what have you, and you want to go a moment's breath, as it were, which gives them the opportunity to look at one another and become emotionally involved. In the script, it was the idea that she would propose to him, but I didn't like that idea. And I thought that Bond should always be the stronger character and should be the doer.
I know I'll never find another girl like you. Will you marry me?
While the film is still in production, George Lazenby finds himself hounded by a group even more nefarious than Spectre.
Distinguished representatives of the world press.
There's terrible press about him, which I can never understand. I think the press just wanted somebody to shoot down after having Connery.
Every day I had to meet a reporter, practically. The press came from all over the world because this character was worldwide. And most of the questions were, you know, what do you think about Sean Connery?
George, obviously there's going to be some comparison between yourself and Sean Connery. How do you think this comparison will affect your image?
My image? No. Well, I mean, I wasn't compared with Sean Connery before. And now it can only lead to better things, I hope.
Before the public are even given a chance to judge Lazenby for themselves, the British press portrays him as a troublemaker, feuding with his co-stars.
The first time I think the press were invited on the set, and there was a love scene between her and I, and she was sitting at another table across the commissary and yelled out, "I'm having garlic for lunch, George, I hope you are." And so the press said, "Diana Rigg eats garlic before love scene." So it made out that we weren't getting along.
As far as any animosity about it, any annoyance or whatever, there was certainly nothing when we were shooting the scene.
You saw the love scene, we were getting along.
Once or twice, there were certain bits of temperament that got in the way, but they weren't lasting.
At the end of the day, we were buddies, you know.
They were obviously after him, as they usually are, to get some exciting stories.
I look back at some of the interviews I did and some of the things I said, and I can see how much growing up I needed to do before I did that role.
Filming goes on despite the controversies. At the end of April, the first unit moves to Portugal and the spectacular Wienhouse estate.
We were going to have Tracy and Bond's wedding at a place called Zambujal. It's just beyond Setúbal.
It's a vast estate, wonderfully feudal system they still have. I mean, people work, live, die, go to school on that estate.
It was a great location.
Wonderful family, lovely family. They were in the film. The two boys and the girl were part of my crowd. And then I had that great idea, too, on the spur of the moment, of Bond throwing her the hat, which I thought was just a nice touch to finish it with her crying at the wedding. I said it to the set dresser. If you ask Peter Lamont, I kept saying to him, I want flowers.
Peter said, I want flowers, flowers, flowers.
I said to him, a flower wedding, Peter.
I've never ever seen so many flowers in my life. I remember Peter said, you know, how about decorating the car?
The Portuguese crowd that we had, as far as they were concerned, it was a real wedding. And it was a good atmosphere.
But the location proves trying for Bernard Lee.
I felt terrible one day. I nearly ran him down with a horse.
He wanted to show off his horsemanship.
They were like sports cars, these ponies that were made for being in bull rings. You could turn them on a sixpence, just, and they go back the other way. And I was kind of chasing Bernard around this horse. And he ran into some roses and scratched his leg, and I felt so bad.
He came back, humble pie and all the rest of it. And we got on with the filming, but it was never forgotten. I mean, certainly Cubby didn't forget it.
Filming continues in Portugal on May the 13th with the pre-credits fight.
And I can remember sending George off with the stunt guy to practice the fight. And they were doing it very nicely all on that sand. And I said, no, get in the water. You've got to be fighting in the water. And George Lazenby said, it's cold. I said, I can't help that. Too bad. Get in the water. Because I knew that all the splashing and all that would make it much more dramatic. We didn't know how to introduce this guy. We took elaborate means of opening a sequence with introducing him and all that sort of thing. So in the end, we said, what's the point? Just let's get on with it.
My name's Bond, James Bond.
And I remember most about that scene was Peter Hunt saying, say that line that you've been saying most of the movie.
This never happened to the other fella.
That was perfect. As always, you sometimes worry so much about things that you just throw away.
And it was a way of breaking the ice, of changing from one guy to the other.
It worked, and it got a tremendous applause from the audience.
Another pivotal scene is intended to provoke just the opposite reaction from viewers.
When I read the book, I cried at the end of the book. And I had the book with me.
I would make him sit and wait and get a bit nervous in order to make him a bit nervous for a scene.
And then I read that end scene in the book and got that emotion going again.
I wanted him to feel nervous and uptight, so that at the end, when she's shot, he really is emotionally involved.
The first take we took, I thought he was going to use it, but I brought a tear down my cheek here.
And he was emotionally involved, and he played it so extremely well.
I was really feeling it in the first one.
There was one where he cried less.
He said, okay, let's do one without the tear. James Bond doesn't cry.
There's no hurry, you see. We have all the time in the world.
I was a little uncertain about the tears in his eyes, but he did them marvelously.
But I had that scene down. I knew it was important.
Thinking ahead, Peter Hunt hedges his bets.
I shot the film in such a way that there was a perfect ending after the marriage, after the wedding. I go right up on a crane as they drive off. And then you could have started the next James Bond film with them driving in their honeymoon, stopping and taking the flowers off, and her getting shot. And then the titles. And then you could have gone on. That was dramatically how it should have been. It would have worked beautifully well.
Whereas ads for You Only Live Twice loudly proclaimed Sean Connery is James Bond, ads for On Her Majesty's Secret Service downplay the fact that another actor is playing the leading role.
There were a number of things that worried everyone about that. It was this, the first was, of course, the lack of Sean Connery as being James Bond. And the unknown, Mr. Lazenby from Australia.
They certainly were concerned that Sean wasn't in the movie anymore.
Despite concerns, no one is quite prepared when George Lazenby's advisor, Ronan O'Reilly, makes an announcement to the press.
Ronan announced to the world, it wasn't me, that I wasn't going to do another Bond picture.
Resignation from what?
Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Harry Saltzman was interviewed and said it was the first time we've heard of it. And then they turned it around that they let me go.
Request granted.
I didn't feel that James Bond was going to go on anymore anyway. I mean, with Easy Rider and all that stuff going on, I thought, well, this guy in a suit with short hair is not going to make it. I should have done two. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And if I had done two, then who knows what would have happened. I would have probably said to myself, hey, I'm James Bond now, what can I do? And gone on for 7.
After his premiere on December the 18th, 1969, On Her Majesty's Secret Service set several box office records.
Didn't lose any money. Made money for United Artists and for Harry and Cubby and everybody else concerned, and we carried on work.
It was one of the few pictures that took a long time just to earn its money back.
But we were obviously never going to use George again.
The fact is, the film didn't do as well, and we had to blame somebody, so we fired the star. That doesn't make us right.
We have to find something else to do. Cubby told me, he said if you'd have stuck with it, you probably would have been the best James Bond.
The tempo was great. George, I thought, was fantastic.
I thought George Lazenby was quite good.
I thought he gave a very good performance as Bond.
If you look at that movie, it's a brilliant movie.
The picture is regarded by many as being one of the best Bond films.
He should have gone on and done the other Bonds. He would have made a very credible Bond and been very good indeed.
Despite all the controversies before, during, and after the filming, Peter Hunt proves that he has what it takes to make an epic James Bond adventure.
I was intent of making the best James Bond film of all.
He made me what I am on the film, Peter. If, it wasn't for him, I wouldn't look as good.
Who's James Bond? It's not Sean Connery, it's not Roger Moore, it's not any of the others. It's James Bond. And he was James Bond.
My name's Bond, James Bond.
James Bond is back in the biggest 007 adventure of them all. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, James Bond has a woman in his life, and her name is Tracy. Of course, James Bond has enemies. But if they think Bond is just going to hang around and let them take over, they're wrong. They're dead wrong. James Bond, 007, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, rated M. Far up. Far out. Far more. James Bond is back. And this time, they drop a mountain on him. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. James Bond, 007, on a racing bobsled, on a ton of dynamite. On one ski. Back comes Bond. Down comes the mountain. On comes the excitement. In the biggest 007 adventure of them all. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Back comes Bond. On comes the excitement in the biggest 007 adventure of them all. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Rated M. Far up. Far out. Far more. James Bond is back on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Rated M. Back comes Bond. Down comes the mountain. On comes the excitement in the biggest 007 adventure of them all. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Rated M.
Good, there it is, James. Hurry.
Turn left, that crowd might discourage them.
Winter strikes hard in Lauterbrunnen, alpine site for a film sequence of car racing on ice, an action-packed sequence that is the essence of a James Bond movie. A man-made ice track ringed with lights was created for the picture On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and this is how the filmmakers shot it on ice at night at 30 degrees below zero. Gorgeous girls have always been part of James Bond's hectic life, and Tracy Bond, this time he actually marries the girl, was played by Diana Rigg. The ice chase sequence called for some hair-raising driving by this talented actress. Film director Peter Hunt held many screen tests in his search for a new James Bond. He described his choice, George Lazenby, as a natural for the part with that rare sense of star quality. The sequence is planned to bring the action from the star's escape from their enemies into a complete involvement in an ice race, a further pursuit, and a hurried, chaotic exit. Hunt saw much of the action in big close-ups and demanded a high degree of skill and imagination from his technicians, particularly in building the special camera mounts for the cars. Diana Rigg brought to the star role a vivacious sense of fun and excitement, mark of a versatile actress. Established in television and theatre, the part of Tracy brings her to the forefront of today's film personalities. This was Peter Hunt's first assignment as director, but work on 5 previous 007 pictures made him an acknowledged expert on the James Bond scene. First editor, then second unit director on earlier Bond pictures, Peter Hunt had the task of coordinating 120 technicians, big crowd scenes, and the mass of detail that is one sequence of a movie shot on an epic scale. A huge production crew of lighting cameramen, assistant directors, operators, soundmen, continuity girls, and many other skills were from a variety of nationalities. The crew included interpreters to bring order out of apparent chaos. Night after freezing night, the drama of the chase sequence was put on film. With the temperature at 30 degrees below 0 centigrade, another background army was at work supplying an endless catering service of hot drinks, soup and food to the actors, drivers and technicians. One of the key figures on the scene was Erich Glavitzer, young Austrian rally driver for the Ford team. Brought in to advise on building the ice track, he supplied escort cars, drivers, and briefed all concerned on handling a bunch of fast cars on ice with cameras turning in all directions.
When Diana Rigg came to Switzerland, she came straight from London. She went straight across to the racing track because she had to drive the film in Rio, the Mercury Cougar, and that's quite a lot, especially for an unexperienced driver, being now in race speed and on an ice track. And I learned her to drive this on ice. First I took a Ford Escort because this car is much easier to drive and easier to handle and to keep in control around corners. I took her for about 3 laps and learned her all about throwing a car into a corner, then with the opposite lock and driving with the accelerator. But I think she took this stuff all in a very short time. She's a lovely driver, really.
The track itself was built to full size in an empty meadow on a plateau in the mountains. The field was slowly flooded and winter frost did the rest. It was then sprayed with water every night to give a fine glass-like surface. After each trial run, and everybody lost count of these, bulldozers leveled the track and the ice was sprayed yet again.
All right, stand by, clear the track, please. Everybody off.
There had to be a close working relationship between Erich Glavitzer and Peter Hunt, working out very precise maneuvers and explaining them to the drivers to give the director the maximum in dramatic film effects.
Red, give me Ferkel mile.
Talking with my drivers was really one of the most important things in the film because I had to tell them all what exactly to do in film business. It's not like racing. It always depends on the distance from the camera to the car, and this distance have to be very exact. And so we talked very much about it, discussed all detail, and every driver gets from me an order what line he has to drive and at what time he has to come into it to ram the other drivers. That must be very exactly, and all the angles and speeds and the distances must be very exact worked out.
Every possible detail had now been worked out. Briefing was complete, and technicians, stars, and drivers moved into position for the final call. Action.
Next, a unique view of a famous fictional hero. The Swiss Alps, beautiful and dangerous. For the pilot of a helicopter, these peaks present the twin hazards of unpredictable wind currents and thin atmosphere. Yet this winter, a daring young man soared into the air suspended from the bottom of a helicopter, challenging the mountain dangers in order to photograph the grandeur of the Alps in a way never before captured on motion picture film. His name is Johnny Jordan. For 3 months this winter, his home has been the Swiss village of Murren, a tiny hamlet perched on a narrow alpine ledge above the Lauterbrunnen Valley. Jordan was not the only visitor. More than 200 members of a motion picture company, led by producers Albert Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, have made Murren their headquarters for the filming of the newest James Bond epic on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Major locations here include the mountaintop fortress of Smersh and a 12,000-foot high glacier, a location inaccessible except by helicopter. It is
is here in the midst of some of the most spectacular scenery in the world that George Lazenby, the screen's new James Bond, makes his debut as 007. The world of James Bond is a world of adventure and glamour. And if the action here isn't enough to convince Lazenby he's become the focal point of this world, the scenery should. Rivaling the fictional adventures of Ian Fleming's superhero is the real-life daring of photographer Johnny Jordan. Jordan's amazing aerial work has become an important element in the Bond successes, an element whose danger is seldom realized by the film audience. While working on the last Bond feature, You Only Live Twice, Jordan lost a leg and very nearly his life in a mid-air collision of copters. But a wooden leg is not the sort of thing to keep a man like Jordan grounded. In fact, for On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Jordan and pilot John Crutzen have come up with a new technique in aerial photography.
I've always been interested in suspending cameras rather than shooting from inside a plane because normal aerial photography has several limitations. John Crutzen and I have come up with what I suppose must be the ultimate in camera suspension. We've constructed a ring around the bottom of the plane, and I, with my camera, hang 18 feet below in a parachute harness. We can do things from it you can't do in a normal aerial situation. We can shoot up without getting the plane's rotor in the shot. We can shoot fully vertical or straight down. We can shoot full astern or pan 360 degrees, which you can't do in any other aircraft because you'll always get the tail section of the cabin in the shot. Of course, hanging out like I do, I must wear a rubber suit to keep from freezing at this altitude. And of course, the thin atmosphere up here makes just getting off the ground with this added weight a problem. I'm in contact with my pilot, John Crutzen, all the time. We have an intercom between us, because my isolation from him makes our teamwork all the more essential.
The results will be seen on the theater screen, but as spectacular as they will look, few in the audience will realize the danger and daring it took to film them.
I suppose it looks exciting, but I'm out there with no cabin around me and I don't feel the effects of speed at all. It feels rather good, like you're an angel with wings.
Johnny Jordan, above it all, challenging the mountains to film James Bond in action.
My name's Bond, James Bond.
Hello, I'm Maud Adams. Welcome to the exotic locations of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Produced in 1969, the sixth 007 adventure was filmed in sunny Portugal and the snow-capped peaks of Switzerland. Bond is first seen leaving Cascais, a seaside resort close to Lisbon, Portugal. He catches up to Tracy at Ginjo Beach, a popular beach for surfers. 007 checks into the Palace Hotel in Estoril. Ian Fleming visited the Estoril Casino during the Second World War and always claimed the experience inspired his first Bond novel, Casino Royale. Draco's birthday party and Bond's wedding to Tracy were filmed at the Vinyas estate in Zambujao. The 9,000-acre private estate comprises orange, lemon, and olive groves, in addition to a private bull ring.
Suppose I were to kill you for a thrill.
The courtship montage was partly filmed at the Benfica Palace and the steeply wooded coastline south of Lisbon near the fishing port of Zezimbra. The jewelry shop where Bond buys Tracy's wedding ring is Joalharia Ferreira Marques Rocio, Lisbon. The film also has locations in England, including M's home, which was the Thames Lawn Estate in Marlow. We next see Bond arriving at the College of Arms in London. Besides record-keeping, the heralds of the College of Arms also perform duties under the jurisdiction of the Earl Marshal, including the arrangement of state funerals and the monarch's coronation in Westminster. The filmmakers also traveled to Bern, the capital of Switzerland. Gumbel's office in Bern is actually the Gauer Schweizerhof Hotel, built in 1859. The clock tower that Bond looks to is on the Heiligeist Church, which is a prime example of 18th century Protestant architecture. As Bond travels to Blofeld's lair, we see him arrive at the rail station in Lauterbrunnen. Lauterbrunnen first appeared in official records in 1257. The town was also the location of the stock car race and Bond trying to call MI6, which was shot in front of the Jungfrau Hotel.
I'll be glad to get my feet on the ground.
Not ground, eyes.
Much of On Her Majesty's Secret Service was filmed at a mountaintop resort on the Schildhorn in the Jungfrau region of Switzerland. The owners quickly renamed their revolving restaurant after Ian Fleming's fictional Piz Gloria. At a height of nearly 3,000 meters, Piz Gloria offers a 360-degree view of the surrounding peaks, which can be enjoyed as one sips a martini at the James Bond bar. Below Piz Gloria is the village of Muren, which is the gateway to some of the finest competitive ski slopes the world over. Arnold Lunn, an Englishman, claimed to have invented the slalom in Muren in 1922. The area is also the home of the famous amateur downhill race from the Shilton Peak to Muren, known as the Inferno. The race, with a 2,170-meter descent, was first held in 1928 and still occurs every February. The bobsled chase was also filmed in Muren. Bond finds Tracy at the skating rink in Grindelwald. The town has been a tourist destination for international travelers since the 17th century.
That reminds me, I didn't even send you flowers.
Back in Portugal, the film's finale was filmed on the Arabira Road near Setúbal, south of Lisbon.